Hey crew, it's Pitt, and I am back with some more ancient lore. Today we are diving back into the Kybalion. We will be reading aloud from chapter 13 and 14, which is getting us pretty close to the end, but not quite there. Um, if you are unfamiliar with how this is going and the things that we are doing here, it is highly recommended that you start at the beginning. It will be linked up here simply because it is easier to keep up with some of the terminology that I might use, some of the things that I might be discussing. You may be a little bit confused by. The first video explains most of it pretty well. I will try to keep up as we go along, but I forget sometimes to add in things, so it is always highly recommended to begin at the beginning. If you don't watch all of it, at least watch the 8 laws of creation. It is the most important. Now we are going to dive in. Let me grab my glasses. We are going to dive in and we're going to begin reading at chapter 13, Gender. our violet video here. Gender is in everything. Everything has its masculine and feminine principles. Gender manifests on all planes.
The Kybalion. The great seventh Hermetic principle, the principle of gender, embodies the truth that there is gender manifested in everything, that the masculine and feminine principles are ever present and active in all phases of phenomena on each and every plane of life. At this point, we think it well to call your attention to the fact that gender, in its Hermetic sense, and sex, in the ordinarily accepted use of the term, are not the same. The word gender is derived from the Latin root meaning to beget, to procreate, to generate, to create, to produce. A moment's consideration will show you that the word has a much broader and more general meaning than the term sex. The latter referring to the physical distinctions between male and female living things. Sex is merely a manifestation of gender on a certain plane of the great physical plane, the plane of organic life. We wish to impress this distinction upon your minds, for the reason that certain writers who have acquired a smattering of the Hermetic philosophy have sought to identify this seventh Hermetic principle with wild and fanciful, and often reprehensible theories and teachings regarding sex. The office of gender is solely that of creating, producing, generating, etc., and its manifestations are visible on every plane of phenomena. It is somewhat difficult to produce proofs of this along scientific lines, for the reason that science has not yet recognized this principle as of universal application. But, still, some proofs are forthcoming from scientific sources. In the first place, we find a distinct manifestation of the principle of gender among the corpuscles, ions or electrons, which constitute the basis of matter, as science now knows the latter, and which, by forming certain combinations, form the atom, which until lately was regarded as final and indivisible. The latest word of science is that the atom is composed of a multitude of corpuscles, electrons or ions, the various names being applied by different authorities, revolving around each other and vibrating at a high degree and intensity. But the accompanying statement is made that the formation of the atom is really due to the clustering of negative corpuscles around a positive one, the positive corpuscles seeming to exert a certain influence upon the negative corpuscles, causing the latter to assume certain combinations and thus create or generate an atom. This is in line with the most ancient Hermetic teachings, which have always identified the masculine principle of gender with the positive, and the feminine with the negative poles of electricity, so called. Now, a word at this point regarding this identification. The public has formed an entirely erroneous impression regarding the qualities of the so-called negative pole of electrified or magnetized matter. The terms positive and negative are very wrongly applied to this phenomenon by science. The word positive means something real and strong as compared with a negative unreality or weakness. Nothing is further from the real facts of electrical phenomena. The so-called negative pole of the battery is really the pole in and by which the generation or production of new forms and energies is manifested. There is nothing negative about it. The best scientific authorities now use the word cathode in place of negative, and the word cathode coming from the Greek root meaning descent, the path of generation, etc. From the cathode pole emerge a swarm of electrons or corpuscles. From the same pole emerge those wonderful rays which have revolutionized scientific conceptions during the past decade. The cathode pole is the mother of all the strange phenomena which have rendered useless the old textbooks, and which have caused many long accepted theories to be relegated to the scrap pile of scientific speculation. The cathode, or negative pole, is the mother principle of electrical phenomena, and of the finest forms of matter as yet known to science. So you see, we are justified in refusing to use the term negative in our consideration of the subject, and in insisting upon substituting the word feminine for the old term. The fact of the case bear us out without taking the Hermetic teachings into consideration, and so we shall use the word feminine in the place of negative in speaking of that pole of activity. The latest scientific teachings are that the creative corpuscles or electrons are feminine. Science says they are composed of negative electricity. We say they are composed of feminine energy. A feminine corpuscle becomes detached from, or rather leaves, a masculine corpuscle and starts on a new career. It actively seeks a union with a masculine corpuscle, being urged thereto by the natural impulse to create new forms of matter or energy. One writer goes so far as to use the term it at once seeks of its own volition, a union, etc. This detachment and uniting form the basis of the greater part of the activities of the chemical world. When the feminine corpuscles unite with a masculine corpuscle, a certain process is begun. The feminine particles vibrate rapidly under the influence of the masculine energy and circle rapidly around the latter. The result is the birth of a new atom. This new atom is really composed of a union of the masculine and feminine electrons, or corpuscles. But when the union is formed, the atom is a separate thing, having certain properties but no longer manifesting the property of free electricity. The process of a detachment or separation of the feminine electrons is called ionization. These electrons, or corpuscles, are the most active workers in nature's field. Arising from their unions or combinations, manifest the varied phenomena of light, heat, electricity, magnetism, attraction, repulsion, chemical affinity, and the reverse, and similar phenomena. And all this arises from the operation of the principle of gender on the plane of energy. The part of the masculine principle seems to be that of directing a certain inherent energy towards the feminine principle, and thus starting into activity the creative processes. But the feminine principle is the one always doing the active, creative work, and this is so on all planes. And yet, each principle is incapable of operative energy without the assistance of the other. In some of the forms of life, the two principles are combined into one organism. For that matter, everything in the organic world manifests both genders. There is always the masculine present in the feminine form, and the feminine form in the feminine form, and the feminine form. The Hermetic teachings include much regarding the operation of the two principles of gender and the production and manifestation of various forms of energy, etc. But we do not deem it expedient to go into detail regarding the same at this point, because we are unable to back up the same with scientific proof, for the reasons that science has not as yet progressed thus far. But the example we have given you of the phenomena of the electrons or corpuscles will show you that science is on the right path, and it will also give you a general idea of the underlying principles.
Some leading scientific investigators have announced their belief in the formation of crystals. There was to be found something that correspond to sex activity, which is another straw showing the direction of scientific winds are blowing. and each year will bring other facts to corroborate the correctness of the Hermetic principle of gender. It will be found that gender is in constant operation and manifestation in the field of inorganic matter and in the field of energy or force. Electricity is now generally regarded as the something into which all other forms of energy seem to melt or dissolve. The electrical theory of the universe is the latest scientific doctrine and is growing rapidly in popularity and general acceptance. And it thus follows that if we are able to discover the phenomena of electricity, even at its very root and source of its manifestations, a clear and unmistakable evidence of the presence of gender and its activities, we are justified in asking you to believe that science, at last, has offered proofs of the existence in all universal phenomena of that great Hermetic principle, the principle of gender. It is not necessary to take up your time with the well-known phenomena of the attraction and repulsion of the atoms, chemical affinity, the loves and hates of the atomic particles, the attraction or cohesion between the molecules of matter. These facts are too well known to need extended comment from us. But have you ever considered that if all these things are manifestations of the gender principle, can you not see that phenomena is on all fours with that of the corpuscles or electrons? And more than this, can you not see the reasonableness of the Hermetic teachings which assert that the very law of gravitation, that strange attraction by reason of which all particles and bodies of matter in the universe tend toward each other, is but another manifestation of the principle of gender, which operates in the direction of attracting the masculine and the feminine to the feminine energies, and vice versa? We cannot offer you scientific proof of this at this time, but examine the phenomena in the light of the Hermetic teachings on the subject, and see if you have not a better working hypothesis than any offered by physical science. Submit all physical phenomena to the test, and you will discern the principle of gender ever in evidence. Let us now pass to consideration of the operation of principle on the mental plane. Many interesting features are there awaiting examination. Okay, so that ends chapter 13, and the law of genders is a real thing, right? There is in everything both creative and destructive forces, both masculine and feminine, right? Opposite. But the masculine tends to be the more destructive of the forces. It is the initiator of change, and the feminine force is the nurturing growth capacity. Both are present in you. Both are present in everything. It is present in the very air you breathe. It has both the power to hurt and help you. Currently, it's helping you, but if you condense any of the various elements that are floating around in the air, if you get too much oxygen, it is deadly. If you get too much nitrogen, it is deadly. If you get too much helium, it is deadly. All of these things are around you all the time. You breathe them all the time, but it is the balance that allows you to be able to breathe. And if it gets out of balance, it gets dangerous. If you get in stagnant air, it can kill you. If you get the wrong concentrations of the wrong elements, you die. The balance is achieved by the law of the genders. It is both the destructive and the creative force working together to create the balance that is the existence that we are. That's why I say that you cannot be born in the wrong body. It is perfectly fine to be a feminine man. It is perfectly fine to be a masculine woman. You have those things in you. There is no need to change anything about you. You are created perfectly the way that you are, in exactly the way that you were meant to be created. And if you think that you're in the wrong body, you are meant to learn the lesson that you're not. Embracing both sides is the way to cleanse the divine, right? You have 7 chakras. The base starts at the bottom, or you have 7 internal chakras and an 8th one outside. But the 7th one, right, the 7th internal one, the one you have to finally clear at the end in order to get access to the 8th, is the divine. And it is cleansed through the application of these particular laws, right? This particular law, which is discussed in these 2 chapters about creative and destructive force, masculine and feminine force, the balance of those things. This gets a little bit into the tying together of the physical science because it's trying to convince people that science and mystery are combined, and they are, but I'm not trying to convince you of that. You don't have to believe me. I'm not here to convince you. I'm here to talk about the things that I know, right? We can have a conversation. You can ask questions, and I will clarify where I need to, but for the most part, I am not doing this to get direction. Some people apparently need that a little bit clearer, and that's not to dig on anybody who has come at me that way, but there are reasons why I reject the teachings of some books. The masculine and feminine are necessary in order for you to do the manifestation work. Absolutely. You have to be able to balance the fact that you have both, that you can utilize both because you need to in order to create. You have to cause the destruction of the old, and you have to create the vision of the new. And if you are not doing those two things when you're putting things into the boxes, you're not going to get any results. Or you're going to get results, but it's not going to be the right ones. If you are only putting, I want to create into this, and you're not getting rid of the things that are holding you back from that, you are going to pull it in. But this is going to bite you in the butt. That is the karmic lashback that will come from not being balanced when trying to manifest. Okay, so now let's dive into mental gender. I am sure there is going to be plenty to discuss on the other side of this chapter to expand upon what we just said. So, chapter 14, mental gender.
Students of psychology who have followed the modern trend of thought along the lines of mental phenomena are struck by the persistence of the dual mind idea, which has manifested itself so strongly in the past 10 or 15 years, and which has given rise to a number of plausible theories regarding the nature and constitution of these two minds. The late Thomas J. Hudson attained great popularity in 1893 by advancing his well-known theory of the objective and subjective minds, which had held existed in every individual. Other writers have attracted almost equal attention by the theories regarding the conscious and subconscious mind, the voluntary and involuntary minds, the active and passive minds, etc., etc. The theories of the various writers differ from each other, but there remains the underlying principle of the duality of mind. The student of Hermetic philosophy is tempted to smile when he reads or hears of these many new theories regarding the duality of mind, each school adhering tenaciously to its own pet theories and each claiming to have discovered the truth. The student turns back the pages of occult history and away back in the dim beginnings of occult teachings. He finds reference to the ancient Hermetic doctrine of the principle of gender on the mental plane, the manifestation of mental gender. And, examining further, he finds that the ancient philosophy took cognizance of the phenomena of the dual mind and accounted for it by the theory of mental gender. This idea of mental gender may be explained in a few words to students who are familiar with the modern theories just alluded to. The masculine principle of mind corresponds with the so-called objective mind, conscious mind, voluntary mind, active mind.
And the feminine principle of mind corresponds with the so-called subjective mind, subconscious mind, involuntary mind, passive mind, etc. Of course, the Hermetic teachings do not agree with the many modern theories regarding the nature of the two phases of mind, nor does it admit many of the facts claimed for the two respective aspects. Some of the said theories and claims being very far-fetched and incapable of standing the test of experiment and demonstration. We point to the phases of agreement merely for the purpose of helping the student to assimilate his previously acquired knowledge with the teachings of the Hermetic philosophy. Students of Hudson will notice the statement at the beginning of his second chapter of The Law of Psychic Phenomena that the mystic jargon of the Hermetic philosophers discloses the same general idea, i.e., the duality of mind. If Dr. Hudson had taken the time and trouble to decipher a little of the mystic jargon of the Hermetic philosophy, he might have received much light upon the subject of the dual mind, but then perhaps his most interesting work might not have been written. Let us now consider the Hermetic teachings regarding mental gender. The Hermetic teachers impart their instruction regarding this subject by bidding their students examine the reports of their consciousness regarding their self. The students are bidden to turn their attention inward upon the self dwelling within each. Each student is led to see that his consciousness gives him first a report of the existence of his self. The report is, I am. This at first seems to be the final words from consciousness, but a little further examination discloses the fact that this I am may be separated or split into two distinct parts or aspects which, while working in unison and in conjunction, yet nevertheless may be separated in consciousness. While at first there seems to be only an I existing, a more careful and closer examination reveals the fact that there exists an I and a me. These mental twins differ in their characteristics and nature, and an examination of their nature and phenomena arising from the same will throw much light upon the problems of mental influence. Let us begin with a consideration of the me, which is usually mistaken for the I by the student, until he presses the inquiry a little further back into the recesses of consciousness. A man thinks of his self, in its aspect of me, as being composed of certain feelings, tastes, likes, dislikes, habits, particular ties, characteristics, etc., all of which go to make up his personality, or the self, known to himself and others. He knows that these emotions and feelings change, are born and die away, are the subject to the principle of rhythm and the principle of polarity, which take him from one extreme of feeling to another. He also thinks of the me as being certain knowledge gathered together in his mind and thus forming a part of himself. This is the me of a man. But we have proceeded too hastily. The me of many men may be said to consist largely of their consciousness of the body and their physical appetites, etc. Their consciousness being largely bound up with their bodily nature. They practically live there. Some men even go so far as to regard their personal apparel as part of their me, and actually seem to consider it a part of themselves. A writer has humorously said that men consist of three parts: soul, body, and clothes. These clothes-conscious people would lose their personality if divested of their clothing by savages upon the occasion of a shipwreck. But even many who are not so closely bound up with the idea of personal raiment stick closely to the consciousness of their bodies being their me. They cannot conceive of a self independent of the body. Their mind seems to them to be practically a something belonging to their body, which in many cases it seems it is indeed. But a man rises in the scale of consciousness, he is able to disentangle his me from the idea of body, and is able to think of his body as belonging to the mental part of him. But even then, he is very apt to identify the me entirely with the mental states, feelings, etc., which he feels exist within him. He is very apt to consider these internal states as identical with himself, instead of their being simply things produced by some part of his mentality and existing within him, of him and in him, but still not himself. He sees that he may change these internal states of feeling by all effort of will, and that he may produce a feeling or state of an exactly opposite nature in the same way, and yet the same me exists. And so, after a while, he is able to set aside these various mental states, emotions, feelings, habits, qualities, characteristics, and other personal mental belongings. He is able to set them aside in the not-me collection of curiosities and encumbrances, as well as valuable possessions. This requires much mental concentration and power of mental analysis on the part of the student. But still, the task is possible for the advanced student, and even those not so far advanced are able to see, in the imagination, how the process may be performed. After this laying aside process has been performed, the student will find himself in conscious possession of a self, which may be considered in its I and me dual aspects. The me will be felt to a the me will be felt to be a something mental in which thoughts, ideas, emotions, feelings, and other mental states may be produced. It may be considered as the mental womb, as the ancients styled it, capable of generating mental offspring. It reports to the consciousness as a me with a latent powers of creation and generation of mental progeny of all sorts and kinds. Its powers of creative energy are felt to be enormous, but still it seems to be conscious that it must receive some form of energy from either its I companion or else from some other I, ere it is able to bring into being its mental creations. This consciousness brings with it a realization of an enormous capacity for mental work and creative ability. But the student soon finds that this is not all that he finds within his inner consciousness. He finds that there exists a mental something which is able to will that the me act along certain creative lines, and which he is also able to stand aside and witness the mental creation. This part of himself he is taught to call his I. He is able to rest in his consciousness at will. He finds there is not a consciousness of an ability to generate and actively create. He finds there not a consciousness of an ability to generate and actively create in the sense of the gradual process attendant upon mental operations, but rather in a sense and consciousness of an ability to project an energy from the I to the me, a process of willing that the mental creation begin and proceed. He also finds the I is able to stand aside and witness the operations of the me's mental creation and generation. This is a dual aspect in the mind of every person. The I represents the masculine principle of mental gender. The me represents the feminine principle. The I represents the aspect of being, the me the aspect of becoming. You will notice that the principle of correspondence operates on this plane just as it does upon the great plane upon which the creation of the universes is performed. These two are similar in kind, although vastly different in degree. As above, so below, as below, so above. The aspects of mind, the masculine and feminine principles of the I and the me, considered in connection with the well-known mental and psychic phenomena, give the master key to these dimly known regions of mental operation and manifestation. The principle of mental gender gives the truth underlying the whole field of the phenomena and mental influence, etc. The tendency of the feminine principle is always in the direction of receiving impressions, while the tendency of the masculine principle is always in the direction of giving out or expressing. The feminine principle has much more varied in the field of operation than has the masculine principle. The feminine principle conducts the work of generating new thoughts, concepts, ideas, including the work of the imagination. The masculine principle contents itself with the work of the will in its varied phases. And yet, without the active aid of the will of the masculine principle, the feminine principle is apt to rest, content with generating mental images, which are the result of impressions received from outside, instead of producing original mental creations. Persons who can give continued attention and thought to a subject actively employ both of the mental principles, the feminine in the work of mental generation and the masculine will in stimulating and energizing the creative portion of the mind. The majority of persons really employ the masculine principle but little and are content to live according to the thoughts and ideas instilled into the me from the I of other minds. But it is not our purpose to dwell upon this phase of the subject, which may be studied from any good textbook upon psychology, with the key that we have given you regarding mental gender. The student of psychic phenomena is aware of the wonderful phenomena classed at the head of telepathy, thought transference, mental influence, suggestion, hypnotism, etc. Many have sought for an explanation for these varied phases of phenomena under the theories of various dual mind teachers. And in a measure they are right, for there is clearly a manifestation of two distinct phases of mental activity. But if such students will consider these dual minds in the light of the Hermetic teachings regarding vibrations and mental gender, they will see the long sought for key is at hand. In the phenomena of telepathy, it is seen how the vibratory energy of the masculine principle is projected towards the feminine principle of another person, and the latter takes the seed thought and allows it to develop into maturity. In the same way that suggestion and hypnotism operates, the masculine principle of the person given the suggestions directs a stream of vibratory energy or willpower towards the feminine principle of the other person, and the latter, accepting it, makes it his own and acts and thinks accordingly. An idea, thus lodged in the mind of another person, grows and develops, and in time is regarded as the rightful mental offspring of the individual, whereas it is in reality like the cuckoo egg placed in the sparrow's nest, where it destroys the rightful offspring and makes itself at home. The normal method is for the masculine and feminine principles in a person's mind to coordinate and act harmoniously in conjunction with each other. But, unfortunately, the masculine principle in the average person is too lazy to act. The display of willpower is too slight, and the consequence is that such persons are ruled almost entirely by the minds and wills of other persons, whom they allow to do their thinking and willing for them. How few original thoughts or original actions are performed by the average person? Are not the majority of persons mere shadows and echoes of others, having stronger wills or minds than themselves? The trouble is that the average person dwells almost altogether in his me consciousness and does not realize that he has such a thing as I. He is polarized in his feminine principle of mind, and the masculine principle, in which is lodged the will, is allowed to remain inactive and not employed. The strong men and women of the world invariably manifest the masculine principle of will, and their strength depends materially upon this fact. Instead of living upon the impressions made upon their minds by others, they dominate their own minds by their will, obtaining the kind of mental images desired, and moreover dominate the minds of others likewise in the same manner. Look at the strong people, how they manage to implant their seed thought in the minds of the masses of the people, thus causing the latter to think thoughts in accordance with the desires and wills of the strong individuals. This is why the masses of people are such sheep-like creatures, never originating an idea of their own, nor using their own powers of mental activity. The manifestation of mental gender may be noticed all around us in everyday life. The magnetic persons are those who are able to use the masculine principle in the way of impressing their ideas upon others. The actor who makes people weep or cry as he wills is employing this principle. And so is the successful orator, statesman, preacher, writer, and other people who are before the public attention. The peculiar influence exerted by some people over others is due to the manifestation of mental gender along the vibrational lines above indicated. In this principle lies the secret of personal magnetism, personal influence, fascination, etc., as well as the phenomena generally grouped under the name hypnotism. The student who has familiarized himself with the phenomena generally spoken of as psychic will have discovered the important part played by the said phenomena by that force which science has styled suggestion, by which term is meant the process or method by which an idea is transferred to or impressed upon the mind of another, causing the second mind to act in accordance therewith. A correct understanding of suggestion is necessary in order to intelligently comprehend the varied psychical phenomena which suggestion underlies. But still more is a knowledge of vibration and mental gender necessary for the student of suggestion. For the whole principle of suggestion depends upon the principle of mental gender and vibration. It is customary for the writers and teachers of suggestion to explain that it is the objective or voluntary mind which make the mental impression or suggestion upon the subjective or involuntary mind. But they do not describe the process or give us an analogy in nature whereby we may more readily comprehend the idea. But if you will think of the matter in the light of the Hermetic teachings, you will be able to see that the energizing of the feminine principle by the vibratory energy of the masculine principle is in accordance with the universal laws of nature, and that the natural world affords countless analogies whereby the principle may be understood. In fact, the Hermetic teachings show that the very creation of the universe follows the same law, and that in all creative manifestations upon the planes of the spiritual, the mental, and the physical, there is always in operation this principle of gender, this manifestation of the masculine and feminine principles, as above, so below, as below, so above. And more than this, when the principle of mental gender is once grasped and understood, the varied phenomena of psychology at once becomes capable of intelligent classification and study. Instead of being very much in the dark, the principle works out in practice because it is based upon immutable, universal laws of life. We shall not enter into an extended discussion of or description of the varied phenomena of mental influence or psychic activity. There are many books, many of them quite good, which have been written and published on this subject of late years. The main facts stated in these various books are correct, although the several writers have attempted to explain the phenomena by various pet theories of their own. The student may acquaint himself with these matters, and by using the theory of mental gender, he will be able to bring out order out of the chaos of conflicting theory and teachings, and may, moreover, readily make himself a master of the subject if he be so inclined. The purpose of the work is not to give an extended account of psychic phenomena, but rather to give to the student a master key, whereby he may unlock the many doors leading into the parts of the temple of knowledge which he may wish to explore. We feel that in this consideration of the teachings of the Kybalion, one may find an explanation which will serve to clear away many perplexing difficulties, a key that will unlock many doors. What is the use of going into detail regarding all of the many features of psychic phenomena and mental science, provided we place in the hands of the student the means whereby he may acquaint himself fully regarding any phase of the subject which may interest him? With the aid of the Kybalion, one may go through any occult library anew, the old light from Egypt illuminating many dark pages and obscure subjects. That is the purpose of this book. We do not come expounding a new philosophy, but rather furnishing the outlines of a great, world-old teaching which will make clear the teachings of others, which will serve as a great reconciler of differing theories and opposing doctrines. And so ends chapter 14. And there's a lot in here. First off, the separation between the me and the I, right? There is a third step there, but the me, it's the meat suit, right? It is the thing that accumulates the knowledge, the hurts, the scars, the pain, the pleasure. All of that accumulates to the me. That is the meat suit. The I is this individualized fragment of the divine, the spark that is your soul, the part that makes the decisions. That is the I. It may accumulate the experience, but it doesn't identify itself with the experience. That is the difference between the me and the I. Now, most people live in the me. They are the meat suit. They are the flesh. They identify with the color of the skin, or they take into too much accountance what genitalia they have. Instead of realizing that they are here intentionally, on purpose, willfully, to experience the things, to gain and gather the different experiences, but to remain apart from them, because it is only by objectively observing them that you can actually learn and grow from them, right? So when you are involved in a grief situation that is recent, so let's use it, it is harder to see the purpose behind the grief, right? It takes a little bit of time. It takes some consideration to figure out what the lessons are behind why you are sad. There are lessons behind every single big emotion that you have, positive and negative. You are meant to learn from these things. But the meat suit suffers the consequences. You through mental transmutation, as they describe it in here, get to rise above the circumstance. Regardless of how bad it is, you get to decide there is a positive here. Regardless of whether it's apparent or not, you, the I, gets to decide that. The me lives in the experience. The me doesn't make that decision. The me doesn't make that distinction. The me does not understand that there is something to learn. The I does. Now, the spirit, the thing that allows the growth, that allows the experience, that allows the change, that allows the becoming, is a vitally important part of that. But that resides in the balance between the meat suit and the I. You have to make the conscious decision, you have to will the actual action, and then the spirit allows it to happen. Now, let's talk about this second half of this, because they gave you some keys, but they did not give you any warnings. I gave you keys last time, like the last video, we gave some keys, but we gave plenty of warnings, and we're going to do the same thing here. I told you, you can absolutely affect the will of another person. That is an entirely possible thing. You can, in fact, implant your ideas in another person. And I will say it again, unequivocally, it is a bad idea. It is almost always, like I don't say always very much, but I almost do here, because it is almost always a bad idea. It will almost always result in an immediate karmic disruption in your life. It doesn't matter how innocuous the thought is. I say this knowing full well you're going to do it. I cannot stop you. I am trying to talk you out of it, but you have to understand that it is possible in order to overcome it. The force of will is a very real thing. You can manifest physically immediately. It isn't, again, not recommended. Pulling things out of nothing always results in karmic disruption, and that is karma in a slightly different way than the Vedas use it, right? We're not really, it is just a term that people are readily associated with the return for your actions, right? It is the balance in action. That is what it is. And if you are forcing your will on anyone at any point without their full consent and knowledge, you will reap those rewards. Like, you are able to do things, you can, but it is a bad idea to be wrongly aligned with any of those. It is a bad idea to implant in someone else the desire to get off of a drug that is about to kill them. It is. You can talk to them. You can persuade them. You can energetically heal them with permission. But do not implant any thoughts in people. I cannot at all be more clear than that. As far as telepathy, that is giving a voice to your thoughts to another person, right? It is not the imposition of your will into someone else. So telepathy is there. It is possible. It is one of those things. It is extremely hard to find two people who are properly aligned to use it correctly. And that is just the long and the short of it. You can project your thoughts into someone else's head. They can hear them and they won't know what to do with them because they are not aligned to receive them. Some people think they are and they are not. There is a lot of people, you may say I am one of them, who is out here giving you knowledge with no thought about it. They don't understand. They are merely taking what they have read and spinning it. I know that it is me simply telling you this, but it is not me telling you this without having done it. I have suffered the karmic repercussions. I do not discuss other people's, I don't talk about other people's lessons, right? But I have attempted to do the wrong thing, and it has indeed recoiled upon me. And I cannot talk about it more without talking about other people's private stuff that I can't talk about. So I can only say that. You don't have to believe me. I'm not here to convince you. I know it sounds like I am, but I'm not. I'm trying to give you the key to not hurt yourself. The Kybalion can let you hurt yourself. They didn't really understand what they were talking about in some of these things, and that might step on a couple of toes, but oh well. You are meant to be balanced. You are the masculine and the feminine at once. You are the individualized divine spark that resides in the meat suit. You have some amazing possibilities that you don't even fully understand. Even some of the fairy tales that you have been told don't go far enough. Some of them are a little bit wild, though, so the discernment has to be there. You have to figure it out on your own. I can't give you all the keys. What I can tell you is that video, the 8 laws of creation, will, for the most part, keep you from suffering. It will, for the most part, keep you from doing things. But one of the key things that's not really discussed in that video is you have free will. So does everyone else on the planet. You have your own timeline. So does everyone else on the planet. And while they may be NPCs in your timeline, they are the player character in theirs. They are making the decisions for themselves over there. You are not allowed to make decisions for them over there. They can give you consent for healing. They can give you consent for telepathy. They can give you consent for mental injection, right? To force your will upon them. They can give you consent for that, but it has to be informed consent. They have to know fully the ramifications of it, and I promise you, you're not going to be able to explain those in a way that will get it done. It is possible to do things that will hurt you. I'm trying to keep you from doing it. That's it, and that's where we're going to let this one go. Hopefully I brought a little bit of enlightenment and not too much confusion to a series of somewhat complicated topics. I know that I have an unconventional belief system and that I have a tendency to step on toes when I am expressing those things. It is not intentional. I do not apologize for it. I do have different knowledge. I have been directly revealed to. And so I have to say the things I do. I don't feel remorse for that, right? There are things in here that have worked for 100 years, but they won't work going forward. Things are changing. It is a different time. We are entering a different time. If you like what I'm doing here, let me know down below. Hit me with a like, share, and a sub. Throw me a comment. Let me know you appreciate it because I like doing this, right? I'm going to continue doing this whether you hit me with comments or not, but it is nice to get the encouragement, right? It is nice to see the results come to fruition. I have gotten several very useful comments so far, and I appreciate you very much. If you really like what I'm doing here, hit me with the super thanks. That is the best way. I feel really awkward asking for money, but it is part of the process, so we have to do it. To the crew, thanks for hanging out. I appreciate every single minute that you are here with me, and I am praying for you every single day. Until next time, I love you. God loves you. You are perfect, whole and complete, just the way that you are. And this has been Pit State. Peace.